So we are live. My name is Paul Pashos and this is the Ethereum Toronto Meetup. We're joined by Joey Krug from the Augur Team. Thanks again, Joey, for joining us today. We're really excited about this project. As fans of Ethereum, the project is being built on Ethereum. It's one of the first major apps or dApps on the Ethereum platform. So thanks again for taking the time to join us. We are expecting or might be joined later on by Jack, the report dev, Jack Peterson, the report dev for the Augur Team, but Joey can also answer all our questions and demo the updated Augur client that's currently running on the Ethereum testnet. So Joey, why don't you demo the latest and greatest from Augur?
Sure. Thanks for having us. So I guess I'll just screen share here.
Yes.
And let's see here. Can you see it?
Yeah, I'm going to maximize the screen so our audience can see it a bit better.
Okay.
Okay, here we go.
So I'm actually just using our web client demo version right now because if I ran ETH, it would probably make the video laggy. So basically, let's go to the overview page or the markets page. So, Augur is a prediction market, and so anybody can create a market on anything on our system. And so you see a bunch of questions here, and people essentially wager on these, and the current price is equivalent to the current probability. So if you look at the Rand Paul question, the market says he has a 10.8% chance of winning the election. And so if I buy no shares, I can change the odds. So if I buy three no shares, it basically makes it so he has a 91.2% chance of no, and it's going to cost me $2.71. And so if I buy those, basically what it does is it sends a transaction to the Ethereum network, and it basically buys it from this equation called a market scoring rule. And so now that I own those shares, if Rand Paul doesn't end up winning, I get $1 for each share I bought, so I'd get $3 back. And then, so basically, it updates the market. It should update like automatically, but for some reason the odds updating is broken right now, so you actually have to refresh the page to do it. Let's see here. Okay, and then the odds updated on the Rand Paul event. And so anybody can essentially, wager on these markets, and anybody can also create a market on anything. So you basically just propose a question, and then it's going to ask you a couple things. It's going to ask you what trading fee do you want to set, and half the fee goes to you, and the other half the fee goes to the people who basically report on the event and decide the payouts. As another thing you can choose is liquidity. So if you look at this right now, if I give it $5 of liquidity, that's not very much. So the market odds are going to be very shaky when it first starts off. So let's give it like 5,000 initial liquidity. And then I can choose an expiration date. So after this date, trading would end, and then the market would be reported on, and the event would be resolved, and then outcomes would be paid out, depending on who won and who lost. And then so to submit a market, it basically submits two transactions to the Ethereum network. It submits an event transaction, which is basically like the actual question we're proposing and the outcomes it has. In this case, it's just yes or no. And then it takes that event, puts it in a market. The reason they're separate is because with events, you can actually combine multiple events into one market. So you could have a market on like two things, and you can figure out the correlations between them. So like a common example that people like to use is like, let's have a market on what GDP will be next year and whether we pass a certain bill or not, like say a stimulus plan. And then of course there's a page where you can basically send cash. In the real system it'll be Ether and basically stable coins. And then there's also a list of your holdings in the markets you've authored. And then the final aspect is basically, reporting on what actually happened. And you don't have to do this, but you can if you want. Right now, there's nothing up for reporting on. let's see, I'm trying to turn off screen share here. And so that's our latest version of Augur, and we're basically working on implementing some new features like multi-dimensional markets and scalar markets. So right now it's just binary, but you can actually have markets that have like a range, and you can essentially, long or short that range.
Now anybody can actually connect to demo.augur.net and try out the demo.
Yep.
That's not connected to the Ethereum testnet, however.
That what?
No, the demo at demo.augur.net, that is not connected. That is not connected.
Oh, it actually is now. It wasn't connected to the testnet like 2 days ago, but we got it connected.
Oh, excellent work. Okay. I actually placed a few bets on there, and it updated. It took a while to update. It took about, I mentioned that's the block time working. It took 30 seconds to update. But it's pretty amazing that it's actually working live on
Yeah.
well. And no, that's really awesome. Also, do you anticipate the actual the demo document to be working with the live net once it goes live?
So the way I see it is we'll basically have like there'll be two versions. One is people who actually run the Ethereum node on their desktop, and they'll basically just go to a website and they'll download the JavaScript file from that. The other group of people is basically people who aren't that familiar with crypto, like people who would use something like a hosted wallet or something. But in our case, what we plan on doing is basically making a sort of blockchain.info style wallets for Ethereum, where all of your cryptography stuff is done client side. The keys would never go to us or anything, and you'd be able to basically create an Ethereum account there and use Augur on that site. And the interesting thing is, since our UI is localhost, it would basically just download the UI. You would check the hash to make sure it matches. You'd sign transactions locally, and then it would submit them to the Ethereum network.
Blockchain.info offers a browser extension. Do you foresee Augur offering that, or is that not secure enough?
Right now, we don't have any plans to offer a browser extension. Maybe after we get the web UI up. So right now, the web UI is just basically demo.augur.net. It's just a shared account, but we want people to be able to make their own accounts.
Now, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, Joey? How did you get into Bitcoin?
I got in 2011 when I saw this post on a forum called overclock.net, and it was saying how you could earn money with your graphics card. And so I thought it was kind of BS, and so I ignored it. And then 6 weeks later, it was still the top post on the entire forum. So I decided to check it out and started mining a bit and playing around with it.
How many Bitcoins did you mine?
Not very many, probably around like 50. I quit once I stopped getting to Bitcoin a day, because once I got below Bitcoin a day, it was like $5. I was like, okay, this isn't enough to be worth the extra heat in my room. So my room was it was like during the summer, and my room was really hot. It was probably like 80 degrees in my room. But I was like, well, Bitcoin's cool, so I'll do this for like a month or two. But after that, I quit.
Oh, you must regret not mining a bit more when you had the chance, right?
Yeah, I think everybody has some similar story.
Now, a lot of people don't know about you. You actually were the first person to send a Bitcoin transaction through Sound.
Yeah, it was basically just, so I was building this kind of a Bitcoin point of sale thing, and back then, so NFC is kind of clunky, especially with Android. I don't know how Apple Pay is, but with Android, NFC is like the chip's located in a specific spot. They don't have the antenna spread across the phone or anything. It's just it's in a very specific location, and so it doesn't work very well. So what I did was I basically created a way to send transactions over Sound, and it'd play a little noise. It's kind of annoying. It'd make your dog bark, and it lasts probably 0.3 seconds, and it would transmit to Bitcoin payment requests using the Sound.
Now you're sitting in a restaurant wanting to pay your waiter with your cell phone and makes little chirpy noises at him.
Yeah, but now it's been now it's just been replaced by Bluetooth Low Energy, and you can actually do BLE transactions across iOS and Android.
So tell us about Sidechain and what motivated you not Sidecoin, what motivated you to develop that project?
Oh, Sidecoin. So what Sidecoin was when we first started working on Augur, we weren't on Ethereum. We were basically forking Bitcoin, and this is before sidechains and Blockstream were announced. So our plan was to basically make sort of an altcoin, but just basically copy the state of Bitcoin. So you take all the Bitcoin addresses and save their balance, and then you distribute a new blockchain, and people could claim their Bitcoin on it, provided they had proof that they owned a private key. And yeah, we've shelved that obviously because we don't need it anymore. But it was kind of a fun project. It also made me not want to build on Bitcoin Core because it's really tightly coupled.
Speaking of building on Bitcoin Core, a lot of people have asked about side chains, whether or not, why are you building on Ethereum and not on Bitcoin? Just give us stories on that.
Yeah, so side chains. So there is no reason why you couldn't have an Ethereum to Bitcoin sidechain, except for the fact that the blockchain guys don't want to support SHA-3 SPV proofs. So that makes it pretty hard. So the only way you can really do a sidechain with Ethereum to Bitcoin is you essentially make a sidechain that's a standard sidechain, and you have it accept SHA-3 proofs, and you can basically transfer to it as an intermediary. But at the end of the day, people are going to use decentralized exchange for most of their transactions anyway, even with the regular sidechains. It's basically just as a way to send large amounts of money while being relatively secure. But most transactions can take place with decentralized exchange, I think. But the other reason I'm not too excited about sidechains is I think they're quite a while off. And so I'm mainly focused on getting something out there on Ethereum, supporting some stable coins, and doing that.
When you say stable coins, you mean like a coin that doesn't fluctuate in value, that actually follows US dollar in value?
Yeah.
So, but initially the stats with Bitcoin as a primary currency on Augur?
So Bitcoin's probably going to be the last currency that we'll be able to use on Augur, because two-way peg sidechains are basically a few years off from now, and we don't really want to use federated peg sidechains because those ones, the problem with them is, especially with prediction markets, it has a huge incentive for the person to just steal all the money, especially if you're doing transactions that involve millions of dollars, which any successful prediction market would have on it. So I imagine we'll first support Ether and stable cryptocurrencies, and then eventually, once two-way pegs are out, we'll allow you to use Bitcoin.
By the way, how did you find out about Ethereum and the Ethereum project?
I found out about Ethereum. Let's see, I found out about it probably February 2014, but I kind of ignored it. And then I started paying serious attention to it again when the counterparty announcement that they forked the EVM and used Serpent or whatever. I started paying attention to Ethereum again right around then, and then basically played around with it and implemented. Since I just started one weekend trying to implement some of our system on Ethereum, and I was I wanted to see how fast is it actually to implement something on this, and it was multiple times faster than we were getting using Bitcoin Core. So we just made the switch.
Right. You put a blog post that I was reading through on Ethereum because you can read faster. How did you get to know Vitalik? I understand he's involved in the project, and also how is Vitalik involved with Augur?
So Vitalik's just a really close advisor. He's helped us with tons of stuff. Way we first talked to him, I think I just joined a Skype conversation with him, and then didn't really talk to him for a while. Then eventually started talking to him again when we started building on Ethereum, because Serpent didn't have features that we wanted, and so I was like, are there any plans to build these? I remember the first time I asked him this, it was about long strings. So it was a string of text, and you could only originally you could only support a few characters, and I was like, well, we need something longer for our markets. And so he came back an hour and 45 minutes later. He's like, hey, I implemented this. And so he's been extremely helpful. He's a really cool guy.
So he's helped with he's helped with optimizing algorithms or code?
So he's helped a bit with our math functions a while back, and then he's going to look at our our math functions again, later once we have them more finalized. So we're still changing stuff pretty regularly.
What details can you give us about the crowd sale? I know there hasn't been a blog post on it. I'm probably just waiting for the Ethereum launch to happen first. But is there anything you can share in terms of details about the crowd sale?
Yeah, so it's basically.
Let's tell us the crowd sale first, so people actually know what that is.
So what it's for is, so in our system, you have to have a way to determine outcomes and do the payouts. Traditional prediction markets like InTrade, before it got shut down, basically just had a third party who did that. What we do instead is basically distribute that amongst a bunch of people, have them report on it, and then we basically provide a financial incentive for them to report honestly, like with what actually happened. And if they don't, they lose something of value. And so the way that works in our system is we have this thing called reputation. There's a finite amount of it, and it varies according to how they report. And if you report, you get a portion of the trading fees, which is half of them, multiplied by whatever fraction of reputation you have. The other half goes to the person who made the actual market. And so we thought about we thought about a few ways to distribute reputation. One is you just raise VC money and give a portion away of it, but that means you're giving away network consensus. That doesn't really work. You can also get away for free. That doesn't really stay compatible because then the people aren't incentivized to report honestly. So we decided the easiest way to do it is to just auction it off. And so we plan to basically auction the reputation off a couple weeks after Frontiers launched.
Well, I'm just going to open up some questions to the audience. Let them ask as well. Anybody have questions? Yes.
So here, for example, in a U.S. federal election, U.S. election, the presidential election, who's reporting on the outcome?
So basically, anyone who buys reputation and owns some of that would report on that event.
Reputation.
So anyone who has reputation would report on that event.
But wouldn't CNN report? Is that how we?
So you can't have an outside.
Yeah, I'm not really sure who would get paid the reputation currency if it's being reported by news media.
Right. So the reason we have people reporting things instead of just plugging into an API from like CNN is because you actually can't do that with smart contracts. They can't at least Ethereum's can't access the internet. And so basically we just have real people do it. And so they're actually going to be things that are very easy to determine the outcome of. Like you're just going to be able to Google it and find the answer. It'd be great if we could just plug into an external API, but we can't. So this is a solution we've chosen.
Yes.
So if I don't buy reputation at the start, can I gain reputation by correctly predicting or correctly reporting stuff, or does reputation have to be purchased?
Yes, so it has to be purchased from somewhere, whether it's initial distribution or from somebody else who's selling it to you. The reason we didn't have each account start off with an initial amount of reputation to build it up is it opens like civil attack vectors, which is where you make a bunch of accounts.
Yeah.
It's kind of actually interesting when you think about what type of questions and bets you expect people to use. Do you have an opinion what sort of type of questions and markets Augur is going to be hosting?
I couldn't hear the question exactly. I think it was, like what types of questions will people be asking? Okay,
yes,
so
the reason why I'm basically asking this question is because it strikes me that reputation and then people reporting back would work the best when the answer is ambiguous, rather than deterministic because it's reported from the outside.
right.
So, for example, when you predict stock market, I know what the value will be because I can read the newspaper. When the answer is ambiguous, if I ask, will I be better off if I do something versus something else?
Right.
That would be actually more interesting.
So there's two categories of markets. The main category of markets are the kind that are deterministic. Like it has an outcome, you can find that outcome after it happens, and you can do payouts accordingly. The type of markets where you say, should I do this or should I do that? Those are called at least what I call them is I call them future markets. It's basically an idea made by Robin Hanson, and it's basically along those lines. You have a few options to choose from, and you want to see which one people think will have a better result. The way you do these is typically you have the person who's asking the question or who wants to see the result. You have that person basically provide a reward to the people who predict on it. Another way you can do it without any subsidy is you basically just say, you can have like conditional markets, like if this happens or if that happens, then what? And if one of those things gets chosen, and those people's money is at stake, for the people who bet on something that like never happened, just get their money returned to them. We haven't implemented that yet.
Yes.
So you mentioned create a market. You sort of said initial. So I guess half of that goes to bid in the decentralized order book, and then half of that goes to the ask price. That way you have a bit of liquidity for people who want to buy with the contract. Is that how it works?
So the initial liquidity, the way that works is you basically put it up there, and the initial traders are basically trading from that pool of initial liquidity. And as more people buy and sell, the liquidity pool gets bigger. The liquidity actually doesn't go to the reporters at all, except like in a few weird edge cases where like the person asks an ag question or something. But typically you get their liquidity returned or whatever's left of it. And the reason there could be, some of it gone is because just due to the nature of the market. If you trade the market and its odds are like 50-50, and then someone buys a bunch of shares to swing them to 0.99, and then they end up being right, you're going to lose some of your initial liquidity. But the liquidity is separate from like trading fees. So you provide the liquidity, and that's just used to kick the market off, and then trading fees are where you actually make the money.
Also, can you speak a little more about the non-binary?
You cut out.
The non-binary contracts. Like,
Oh.
What will those look like?
Scalers, for example.
Yeah, so there's a couple types. So the simplest one is a categorical market, and that's like, will it be X, Y, Z, or will it be A, B, or C? Another type is scalar markets. So that's like, let's say Apple's currently $150 a share. The minimum price is obviously 0. The maximum, go with like 500 or something. You can basically long or short it as a scalar market. And then you can also combine any of these market types in any way you want. We only support 3 dimensions right now, but you can basically combine a binary market with a categorical, binary with scalar, all the different combinations, you can combine them. And what that allows you to do is figure out the correlations between things. So, like, if you take like one of those futurarchy markets, which is about like what's the best decision, a really interesting one is like you have multiple decisions to make about a company, whether you should hire this person as CEO or fire the current CEO, whether you should spend R&D on X or Y, and where you should spend your marketing money or something. And if you do it in 3 dimensions like that, you can figure out a better combination than you may have gotten from just picking them separately. So that's what the main benefit of multidimensional markets is. It allows you to see correlations. It may have been unclear when you examine the events separately.
So how do you see other
I can't hear anything.
I was going to say, how do you see getting Augur, for Augur outside of this sort of you already know about Ethereum?
So it's presumed that people that hold Bitcoin will want to place predictions with Augur, but how are you going to get further adoption to people who are holding fiat, for example?
Oh, right. Okay. So there's a few projects in the works to basically make stable coins on Ethereum that allow you to essentially buy in with like an ACH transfer. So you log in with your bank account and send the money instantly. That's an interesting approach. I think a lot of mainstream adoption will come from that route. Initially we'll launch and it'll just be the crypto people using it. But once those sort of stable currency ways to get in, like the gateways get in, I think you'll see more mainstream adoption. Those people, I imagine them just using like the web client. They go to a website. It asks them to sign up for an account. They sign up for an account. We don't store anything. It's all stored client side. They have to remember their password, and they'll be able to even like send money to the network using an ACH transfer. Gavin was also doing some work with this. He's like made IBAN transactions, such as like international bank something. It's some transfer network that banks use. He actually added a transaction type to Ethereum specifically for that.
Julie, how much volume in terms of US dollars do you anticipate in the first year?
I have no idea. I guess the best way to estimate that would probably just be to ask our markets, to be honest. Once we have like accounts that are where each person can make their own account, that'd be a sort of question I'd want to ask. Right now, everybody just uses the shared liquidity pool and the shared cash on the demo, so it's not very useful. Yeah, I don't know.
Don't care to make a prediction on that, do you?
If I were making a prediction on it, let's see here.
We're not going to hold this way.
Make a prediction market for it.
Yeah, that's what I do. I do market.
Someone create some software to do that.
Yeah. The current centralized ones don't have enough volume. I mean, I know the current centralized ones. Well, why don't you? I think another question I want to ask you, because the current centralized markets use open order books. What are the advantages of using LSRM, logarithmic market scoring rule, versus the other options?
Okay, so a logarithmic market scoring rule is it's basically the idea that a traditional market, of course, has an order book. You buy and sell, and you meet in the middle somewhere. With a market scoring rule, you basically buy and sell from an equation. It's one of the hardest things in the system to wrap your head around, because it doesn't really make intuitive sense. Like for each trade, it doesn't necessarily mean there's a direct counterpart. There may be one a few hours later, but it's not like a traditional order book. And the benefits of this are you get finite price estimates. So if you have an order book and you have low liquidity, it's not uncommon to see something where you have a 66% chance of no and a 60% chance of yes, which is pretty useless. It makes no sense. It adds to more than one. And market scoring rules don't have that problem. The other thing market scoring rules allow you to do is they have infinite order depth. So what this means is if I'm a huge whale and I want to bet a ton of money on something, I can keep buying up as long as I want. Eventually the price is going to go up to like 0.99999 repeating, but that order depth is still there. So it provides a lot of nice economic incentives. I was just going to say, another interesting thing about market scoring rules is there's been some recent research that's shown that there's these algorithms in machine learning that are called no-regret algorithms, and basically it's like if you have a few thousand experts and you're asking them questions, and if you basically after a few rounds you reward experts who said something that actually became true, and you de-weight people who were wrong. If you look at the math of those no-regret algorithms is actually practically the same math as market scoring rules use. Nobody really discovered that until recently. Another interesting thing is that if you look at total entropy, information entropy, the buy and sell function for market scoring rule is also the same equation as they use in physics for entropy in a system.
Yeah, my question is actually a little bit more about that. Paul Stortz, of course, is the man who's designed a lot of the kind of the mechanism design that you guys are using for the reputation aspect of Augur. You guys have had some kind of interesting public interactions with him. In particular, he seems to take issue with the way that you're implementing and or modifying his algorithm. What do you think about that? What do you have to say about that?
So I think the thing he's taking most issue with, at least from what he said, is that we're using Ethereum. The modifying his algorithm thing is something I kind of actually brought up. And the reason we're modifying it is, so when you report on the outcomes of events, there's a couple ways to do this. Basically, all you're trying to do is figure out who added the most variance to the system, because the idea is that lies are more variable than truth. It's why when police interrogate people, they do it in separate rooms. And so both algorithms try to do the same thing. The one Paul originally proposed is variant of principal component analysis. And basically you find this vector, or basically a list of numbers, and it's called the principal component. And it basically allows you to figure out how much each reporter contributed to the variance. That's one way of doing it. What we've decided to do instead is use a clustering algorithm. So in machine learning, clustering is basically, you have a bunch of different groups, and it's basically what it sounds like. You need to cluster them and basically segregate them into different categories. And the benefits of clustering are a few. One is it's a lot cheaper than PCA. PCA is very expensive. Clustering is very simple. And the other benefit is PCA sometimes gets the scores wrong. So like your variance score, most of the time it's right. Most of the time it does a pretty good job. But occasionally it gets the score wrong. And so what this means is if you're rewarding people who reported dishonestly, and sometimes it means you take money from people who reported honestly, or I guess take rep. And so with clustering, that doesn't really happen because it's so much simpler. The way you find how different someone is, or how variant their report is you basically just use the Euclidean distance function, which is the function they teach everybody in middle school. You find a few points, like x2 minus x1 squared, y2 minus y1 squared, and square root of that. And we do that for all the reporters. So we figure out how far each report is from the other reports. And then what happens is a cluster of reports surfaces which are very similar to each other. And that's basically the truth cluster. And then you just penalize people how far they are from the truth cluster. And it works really well, and it's really cheap. So our implementation of PCA on Ethereum, it had about 12 contracts. And our clustering one is at 3.
So at the end of the day, it's mostly about trying to get that performance more appropriate to the blockchain?
Yeah, it's mainly a performance thing. And then it's also a bit of clustering has a nice benefit that it doesn't get the scores wrong. But
I think that's the part that Paul Storz might take a little bit of issue with. I think he might say that from the mathematics perspective, you don't actually know which is wrong yet. That's why you have to have that criticism.
I can hit the last part of your question.
I said I don't know where you dropped off, but what Paul Storz might say to that is that you actually don't want that rapid convergence, because from an external perspective, you could say this is right or this is wrong, but from a mathematical perspective, when you're just writing an algorithm that doesn't know which is right or wrong, it actually has to be a little bit more careful about deciding. That's a feature, not a bug, you might say.
Right. So the thing I would say to that is basically, he looked at the way we ran our Monte Carlo simulations, and he thought we were basically assigning specific truth values and then manipulating things afterwards according to that, and figuring out how truthfully people reported. But the way we actually made these Monte Carlos is the exact same way we made its own sample test cases, which is you create a report matrix, and then you figure out what the outcome is, and it's just a weighted average. And if you penalize the reporters in different ways, you can see what the weighted average outcome would be. And so, for my test and my clustering algorithm, there were 2 categories of test views. The first sort of eyeball group of tests I used were, I just took the ones that are on Paul's open source repo. He has about 30 or 40 tests there, and I ran them by hand in my clustering algorithm. They got all of them right except for one, which is one where people reported, basically a bunch of people didn't report something. It's where you have say 15 events, people only report on 3 or 4 of them. The basic PCA algorithm gets 8 or 9 of those wrong. That's a small test case, it's a small sample size. So what we did was we ran Monte Carlo simulations. And those show that clustering is consistently better than PCA. Now, if someone has, if someone came to me and is like, oh, hey, I think clustering might be vulnerable to X, Y, and Z. If they tell me what parameters it has, I gladly test it because I want to know just as much as everybody else if there's a problem with it. Vitalik actually commented on our blog post and said, hey, there might be a vulnerability if you do this. I was actually really impressed because he found that out almost immediately. It took me a few hours to discover that vulnerability when I initially wrote the algorithm. And but I already accounted for it, and so it's not an issue. But that doesn't mean there's not other issues. right now, according to the best evidence we have, it performs better than PCA. But that doesn't mean there's not a flaw. That's why testing is, paramount.
Yeah, thanks.
Joe, thank you for talking about this. I have a few questions. Number one, can you tell me a little bit about, you say you have 7 people working full time. How do you guys, 7 people, get fund? Like how did you able to continue working? What's the revenue, or what's the interest, financial benefit for you 7 people?
So for that question, basically we've gotten some funding to basically get us to the crowd sale. It's mostly bridge loans. Vitalik's given us some, and a few other people. But that's the main source of funding. We all take really low salaries. There's not like a huge financial incentive for us to work on this. Like I make around $2,000 a month. If I wanted a big financial incentive, like go work for somebody, right, as an engineer. But I'm mostly focused on getting this out there because I think it's an awesome project.
How much money do you need to get to 1.0 release?
So we basically need to get to 1.0 release. We pretty much need to get through like December, which means we need around $125,000 to get there. After that, it's mainly like scalability and these things. I was looking at the roadmap that I have for our backend code the other day, and it's actually pretty close to being completed. I estimate to have almost all that completed by like sometime in September. But the main thing we want to hold off on launching for a while is we want to test everything a lot.
What's the your system prevents or protect from somebody being the essentially. So in other words, you think about a sports team, football, and the team can bet against itself. The future markets can say that one team's going to win, and that team can bet against itself. Lose. Purpose. To what extent can your system protect these people gaming?
So a lot of that kind of output, I guess, to clarify, when you say gaming, are you referring to gaming on the market side or gaming on the payout side?
Gaming, yeah. So.
Payout. Okay. So basically, there's a few things here. So the core idea is that truth is essentially a Schelling point. So this is the same idea that both Paul Stork and Vitalik stumbled upon. Paul Stork was at a truth point, and Vitalik came up with a proposal for Schelling point. And it's the same core idea, which is basically, if you ask a bunch of people something, the truth is the most likely response, except in the case that they collude. If they collude, they can collude, to try to make a profit by betting on something that's very unlikely and then reporting that happened to win money. And so we disincentivize that a few ways. The way reputation works is basically each report is weighted by how much reputation you have, and you get trading fees in proportion to how much reputation you have. So your reputation is worth whatever the future value of trading fees is determined by the market, and that's how much each rep is worth. And so if you lie in the outcome and you don't have a 51% collusion, then you actually lose reputation. And the main way we disincentivize collusion is basically simple cryptographic predict and reveal. And of course, there's ways to get around this if zero number proofs ever become practical. But right now, what you do is you basically make your report, you add a random number to it, you hash it, and you submit it to the network. And then it gets locked in. And then you reveal your report to the network. And so what this means is, if I want to collude with you to try to cheat on something, the only way you can do it, trustfully, is if I have your hash and I have your report, and I can prove that it hashes to whatever your value is. Otherwise, I have no idea if you colluded with me or not.
That's on the reputation side. What about on the payout side? In other words, I don't care about my reputation. That's what I mean.
Well, the reputation and payout side are like inherently intertwined. So reporting decides the payout.
What is it a report? I mean, you see that in a football game, it's reported, watching it live on TV, what the result is. there's no value in the reporting. The reporting is not subjectively the camera is recording.
I think to give a concrete example of what he's thinking of here, I think he's just thinking of, like, take the simple case of someone in a football team is their team is projected to win. They go on the prediction market, which is working properly. Their projection is right. It is likely that they're going to win, but because of this, there's a strong economic incentive for them to bet against their team and then tank their team's performance so that they actually lose. That's more the scenario he's talking about.
Okay. So, you know, I haven't really thought of a good way around that. When you have huge volume, that becomes a problem. It's never become a problem in practice before, but it could in theory. If you look at, it's like one of the reasons InTrade got shut down was because the CFTC said, well, wagering on political elections could influence the result of elections. That never actually happened, but it doesn't mean it couldn't. I don't know if there's really any way to prevent that from happening, though. Because prediction markets, they do add financial incentives to things that otherwise might not have that big of an incentive.
Joey, you may have read William's blog on the Ethereum marketplace. Question?
I do. So I'm trying to understand a little bit more about the crowd sale. I know you talked about it a couple of times. So what are your expectations in terms of how much you want to raise? And is it like a crypto equity? I'm not getting exactly where's the money going to, and that dives into your financial model. Like, do you keep a cut? Do you keep a percentage every time there is a future transaction? How does the crowd sale relate to your financial model?
Right. So we hope to raise like 2 or 3 million in the crowd sale. And where that goes is it goes to Forecast Foundation. It's basically just a nonprofit, and it's basically who we work for. And it'll basically continue development of the software. As for the profit model, so the organization itself, has no profit model. It's basically just designed to build the software and get it out there. Us, we don't take like an explicit fee or anything. Each of us will have some reputation, each of us on the team. And so basically, we have an incentive there because we report on events and we do it honestly. We'll get some of the training from them. But the foundation itself doesn't really have any incentive.
Sorry. I actually want to ask, do you agree between $2 and $3 million?
Pardon?
Did you say you're looking to raise between $2 and $3 million?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. So what does it get me if I participate in your crowd sale? What do I get? Do I get crypto equity? Do I get tokens? Do I get Ether or Bitcoin? What do I
So you get reputation tokens.
Yeah.
Reputation has a market value.
Yeah.
You can resell. Yeah. If you
Yes.
you can sell your reputation.
Yeah.
So if I hope you don't mind if I jump in here.
So I guess the first question is, he asked, what do you get? So you get reputation, and you basically, as long as you report on the events every few weeks, did this happen or not, you get half the trading fees of the events multiplied by whatever fraction of reputation you have. So if you own 5% of reputation, and the average trading fee is 1%, you'll get 1% of all volume multiplied by 5%, and that's how much money you'll get per time period. And so that's basically the financial incentive for reporters and the financial incentive to buy into the crowd sale. As for whether you can sell reputation, so in our system you can. It's not traditional reputation. It's not like it's basically like, since all it's based off of is financial incentives. It doesn't really matter if you buy it, because if you buy it, you've basically spent this cost, and if you report dishonestly, you'll lose money. The risk is always that if one person buys more than half of it, then they can just decide the outcomes of events. But that'd be hard, because as soon as you start buying large quantities, the price would shoot up.
Okay, so there's a crowd sale, you sell a finite amount of reputation.
Is it still 11 million, by the way? Yeah.
Pardon?
You buy reputation, is it still fixed at 11 million?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, so you sell a fixed amount of reputation. So let's say that it was only sold to the people in this room, we all got some equal share. And then one made a wrong report, they would lose their reputation and it would revert back to the ownership of the foundation.
No. So if you report this honestly, basically the reputation is distributed amongst people who report it honestly.
Huh.
Right, so if you lie, you lose your money. If you tell the truth, you get more reputation. That's the thing.
And reputation is just, it's a component.
Yes.
It's an element you just have to go. It's the units, right? The way you
Can you repeat the question? I can hear.
Sorry, I mean, what I gathered is even though we the reputation is like a personal quality or whatever, it's not. It's just basically shares or units or points.
What's the unit of the reputation? What's the unit base?
Oh, right. So it's basically just like a score essentially. So each person has a reputation score. You can trade it in, sell it or buy it or whatever. Each account has a score associated with it. It's like a token. And when you report on an event, your report is weighted by how much reputation you have. So if you have 10 and I have 1, we each submit a report. Your report is essentially submitted 10 times. It's not actually done like that because that'd be expensive, but it's just multiplied by 10. And then you would get 10 times as many trading fees as me because you own 10 times reputation.
That's not dissimilar for me paying $10 up for every dollar you It's the same.
I couldn't hear you.
I'm going to try again. So it's not too dissimilar for if we made a bet, I put $10 for every dollar you put up.
Right, exactly.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, it's just proportional.
Right, we just happen to use units of currency that we call reputation.
Mm-hmm.
Already on time, Joey.
What?
Already on time. Do you have time for a few more questions?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yes.
If there's a lot of people, say for example, there's bets on a sporting event, and is there some sort of concern that some people will maybe hook up to some API for the results of the sporting event, and then when the results come in, they'll just have maybe hundreds of accounts all reporting on what happened, and then one person with a bunch of accounts will just sort of suck up all the reputation.
So the interesting thing is if you make a bunch of accounts, so let's say we have 1,000 rep, that's all we have in the system. You own it all. If you make 1,000 accounts, or if you have one account with 1,000 reps, it's no different. Functionally speaking, it's the exact same thing. So, but you did touch on an interesting risk, which is the risk that people just plug into APIs.
You can automate the reporting.
Right. Which it could be a problem if the API essentially lied on its outcome.
But it's really wrong with that. I mean, if they're still reporting, I guess it makes sense.
Yeah. I think for things like sporting matches, it kind of makes sense to just use an API to do your reports.
Quick one. Is there a risk to be perceived as a gambling service and then be shut down as a result of that?
So what our plans are with the foundation is we're basically building software, and we don't plan to make any markets on it. None of us, in our employment agreements, none of us can make markets. None of us can actually bet on market. And so there is some risk there, but it's kind of similar to the risk BitTorrent faced when they launched. They basically have this platform, and you could do legal stuff on it. There's legal markets you can make, and you can do illegal stuff on it. The people who tend to be gone after are the people who make big aggregations of illegal content. So with BitTorrent, it's the torrent sites. With our system, it'd be large market makers.
I understand that after the event is closed and in 30 days you have a first reporting which is not disclosed, and then another 30 days later you have another reporting. then you agree on a consensus. Do you combine these two reporting together, or are they separate? You only based on the open book reporting?
So they're essentially combined. So if you submit, if you don't submit, your sealed report in the first half, you can't reveal anything in the second. So you have to participate in both halves. Second half is pretty easy. You just have a client up, and you just turn your client on sometime in that month, and it will automatically submit it.
So what's the benefit of two separate? One is a closed book, another is open. What's the intention there?
Right. So the intention is so after you submit the closed part, in the open part, if you submit something that doesn't match up to the closed part, it means you're basically trying to change your report. And so what this does is it forces people to essentially, it provides a huge incentive to not cheat with other people. Because let's say we're in the closed part, and you and I want to cheat together, and we want to report on something that didn't happen. And since you're submitting something close to the network, the only way we can cheat is if you provide me some secret data, and I verify that it matches your closed report. Now, if I do that, I have two choices. One, I can just cheat with you, and that's the end of it. Or two, I can submit it to the network and essentially steal your reputation, because I can basically prove that you were trying to cheat. And the idea is that people who are unscrupulous enough to try to cheat wouldn't mind stealing another person's reputation they're trying to cheat with. It's like, if you're a criminal, you necessarily probably shouldn't trust another criminal.
Also, the crowd sales reputation value you fix at the 11 million token unit. Is that sufficient? I imagine that, let's say the Augurs become very successful, and in the future you could have so many questions that require so many reporting. Otherwise, each reporter, reputation token holder will be overwhelmed by amount of questions have to be reported. Would that limit the scalability of the future of the Augur?
So there's two things. So each reputation unit is divisible, just like Bitcoin. So you can you have millibitcoin, satoshis, all that stuff. And then as for scalability, there's two ways to scale. One is you basically make separate subject categories, and so you choose to report on a certain subject, whether it's politics, sports, and you could segregate those farther as like political elections and events or something like that. The other way to scale is basically do randomized reporting. So if you're a reporter, you have a certain % chance of getting selected to report on an event. So basically subsets of reporters report on an event. The subject-based scaling is a bit more secure in my opinion. But if it got to be like a huge system with hundreds of millions in volume, then subset-based where you basically have a random chance to report on an event would be pretty secure as well, I think.
Joyce, give us an hour just time. We'll just have one more question. Okay, Joy, let's give him a hand. He's been really great.
Thank you.
Ethereum Toronto, thank you for your time, Joey. We wish Augur all the success.
Thanks for having me.
You're most welcome. Okay, take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.